Hi, and welcome to the Lockdown Economy, a series of interviews by the think tank AlterContacts, where real entrepreneurs share their insight. My name is Peter Bell, and today my guest is Darren Richardson, co-founder of Gardiner Richardson, an award-winning strategic brand communications agency specializing in brand development, strategy, design, PR, social media, and content creation. Hi, Darren, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to see you, Peter.
Good. So let's maybe start by telling me a little bit more about your firm, when you were founded.
So Gardiner Richardson, as you mentioned, are a strategic brand communications agency. We've been going now for 23 years. So we've kind of lived through quite a few different times, a few recessions, probably nothing like we've lived through in the last year. From our base in Newcastle, there's 18 members of the team. We operate in the Northeast, in the UK, and across Europe and the US.
So how did, in your mind, how did the lockdown and the pandemic affect your business? Maybe think about the key challenges that you guys faced and how did you go about solving them?
Yeah, well, I suppose like everyone, it was the immediate thing was just the actual shock of it happening. It isn't like, as I mentioned, we've lived through recessions, and you could kind of see recessions coming, and you had forewarning, and you'd kind of lived and worked through them, so you knew the things to expect. You knew there was going to be financial hardships. You could start a plan. You could put things in place. I think the big difference with the COVID pandemic was just the fact that it was like nothing we'd ever experienced, and it was the speed of which it happened. And I'm sure everyone had said the same thing, really. And I think the challenges that we faced were probably, but from there's the sort of practical challenges as well as emotional challenges. I think the practical challenges were just adjusting to the fact that we suddenly had a 50 to 60% drop in revenue on a monthly basis, because the communications industry is an industry that often gets hit hard. We've known that from previous recessions. When people have hardships, they stop spending in the communications world. They'll stop with their advertising agency. They'll stop with their PR agency. They'll wind things down because they'll retreat in and they'll try and save money. And we're one of the great barometer areas where we can sense when there's something coming, because people stop spending. So I suppose the key thing was that we had to adjust financially and think of a new model. So think of how many people do we need in the business. I mean, the furlough scheme was an absolute godsend as we've all probably found. And that allowed us to think about who do we need in the business, who do we need outside the business, who's going to be furloughed, who are the people that we need to retain to manage the projects we've got, and to also build that new offer that we knew we needed to create, based on the fact we knew that everything was going to change fairly rapidly. Mm-hmm. So I think there were some real practical things. And then on a real practical level, we had a massive studio of 3,500 square feet in the middle of Newcastle, empty. Yeah, exactly. And we're suddenly all stuck at home. So we had a big office space, which we all love and is a major part of how we work. It's a very collaborative industry, the creative industry. It's where people like being around each other. It's those conversations that you have that spark those ideas, thoughts off that we all need and crave, really. And then, so I think, and then there was the emotional side of it, of actually suddenly being detached from people that you're normally in that space with. Mm-hmm. So there was the practical expense of, a significant monthly outgoing when on a space which is no longer needed. And then being separated, it was quite rapid. I remember being in the office. I remember we all suddenly said, we all have to now work from home, guys, and saying to everybody, right, we're now going to work from home. And it's, in some ways, saying it seemed easier than doing it. Yeah. And then the reality of actually then all working remotely when you have to try and adapt to a brave new world, when normally you could do that in a space together collaboratively and feel more supported and more, I suppose, more in control, because you're there with a number of other people, and there's an element of confidence that gives you. I think that sort of the challenges of, like I say, have been, I think, practical and emotional, and how we would start to look after the team when we're not in the same space.
Yeah.
And that's been a real challenge, and not just for us, but for everybody really. When, you know, a major part of Gardiner Richardson is our sort of ethos, our philosophy, our culture. You know, Lucy, my co-founder, and myself have a very similar ethos and view of people and looking after people. I think, you know, we're the only, I think, agency that I know of in the Northeast that has a PR director. Sorry, a HR director, sorry. We have a director who looks after people. You know, Judith, she's like she looks after people. We care about people. We want them to know that they're supported and looked after. And to suddenly go from that as a really tight-knit group of people who work very well together and have a, you know, I genuinely feel our studio, there was a real sense of sort of psychological safety in that environment where people could, you know, perform at their best because they know they're respected, they're trusted, and they're given that freedom, but they're given that support when they need it. To suddenly then being wrenched apart and trying to maintain that remotely, that's been a huge challenge. Yeah, huge.
And with regards to solving some of these challenges, you know, you mentioned about the difficulties of remote working. Are you kind of addressing it as to, how did you go about addressing it? Was it driven by performance, or was it driven by, just explain, how did you go to?
Yeah, well, in terms of how we looked at in terms of the team and who we had to furlough, because we had to look at an operational model where who did we furlough and who do we need to keep in the business. And that really just had to come down to what were the projects that were left remaining when the walls came tumbling down, when things stopped. And, you know, some of our clients were fine, and some of them obviously were massively affected, and some of them actually found themselves with a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
And we just had to kind of look at the team and who were the members that we needed that were going to be there with the projects that were remaining, in terms of the practicalities of it. In terms of how we adjusted working remotely, I think we obviously, like everybody, are now very familiar with Zoom, Teams, and whatever, WebEx. You know, I think I've worked in every sort of conferencing platform that there is. I think we could do a what's on guide. So I think that I think the big thing for us was not just the technology of that, which I think we all have to just get used to. It's making sure that we could give time to people. And we have a regular sort of Thursday social now, which it's quite important, where it's just about how people are. But I think beyond that, it's also about just speaking to people about how they are and really understanding their personal circumstances, not just thinking of work. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar, you know, leadership isn't just about alpha males out there winning business and sort of, you know, shouting and screaming. It's about empathy, it's about support, it's about looking after people. And I think when you're suddenly remote, you have to try even harder and put more emphasis on actually how people are getting on. You know, some of the team have had to homeschool when they've got young kids. I'm fortunate I've got grown-up kids now, so I'm not in that same predicament, but I have to then put myself in their shoes when my kids were younger. How might that feel? So I think it was really spending some time, Lucy and myself, just checking in with the team regularly, individually, like, how are you? How's things? How's the family? We all know their family, we know their family situations because it's who we are anyway, but you have to try just even harder to figure out how they're getting on. And I think when someone knows that you genuinely care, it's not just done for lip service, I think that makes them feel a lot more secure. I think they feel confident, because at the end of the day, you know, we often say that we give confidence to our clients, but we have to give confidence to our team that we're in control, that, you know, that myself and Lucy and my fellow directors are in control of the business, and we can look after the business and the individuals in the business. We can't control the things that are around us, but we can look after the things in the business. One of the big challenges I think we found is actually, I'm sure like everybody, was getting information.
Yeah.
You know, what's happening, whether that was through the furlough scheme, whether that was through financial support. I think we were actually one of the first businesses in Newcastle to get one of the Sybil's loans, which we did very quickly because we thought, let's just get that just in case we need it. We've been very fortunate that we haven't used it, but we were grateful the fact that we could get that. And I have to say that a big part of the shifting to online as well and being remote was not just the team, it's looking after the team, it's our network of advisors and people that we know around us that are really important. And I think it's also our clients as well, Peter. Our clients are looking for confidence, to tell you the truth.
Well,
you know, they're all suffering.
Yeah, exactly. That's the next question I was going to ask about. You know, how are your customers or your competition doing? What's your knowledge about how they've evolved? And
I'd say that some, like, we do work with, so for example, we have clients sort of in the Northeast, we have clients nationally, and we have clients then internationally. And I would say people, and we have them in different sectors, so we're not kind of sector specific. We work in, you know, work in the professional services, we'll work in manufacturing, we'll work in FMCG. I'd say that people like, we work for Grand Central Trains, which is a train operator, which operates across from the north of England to London. Yeah. Obviously no trains were running, so therefore, you know, their retainer was stopped. We operate with people like Fresh and Balance, who are drink and smoke awareness officers through government, which we worked for about 10 years. Obviously, that was still quite an important thing, particularly drinking at a time when, you know, I mean, we're all, prior to this pandemic, we were going into a period where people, there was a high awareness of depression, of mental illness, going into a massive lockdown. You know, drinking, smoking, these are two things that they wanted to keep, the government were keen to keep promoting the health benefits of. So we were actively still busy in those areas. But then, you know, one of our clients over in Austria, Egger, who we work with for years, their business dropped by 60%, and they're you know, they operate in 23 different countries. They're just under a €2 billion company, but everything ground to a halt. Because obviously manufacturing stopped, people are not doing construction stopped. And when the construction industry stops, a lot of support services around that sector stop. But then we've noticed that other clients have seen opportunities. We do work with a company in London called Leaders in Sport, which is a sort of, think of them as they work with a lot of elite sportsmen around the world in the Premier League, the NBA, NFL. They saw it as a massive opportunity to go from physical events to online events. So we work with them really rapidly to develop models to help go out there and spread the word to bring more people to virtual events. So instead of getting, you know, 600 people at an event, they might get 6,000 at a virtual event. Yeah. So there's a lot of people who were kind of adjusting to this new remote working, online working, who were taking opportunities. So I'd say that going back to Egger, who is a client we've had for many years, who really suffered massively at the start of lockdown. Now they actually can't match the demand for their product because there's been more people at home, more people doing home decoration, home renovation, people doing extensions, making their homes better. And they literally can't meet demand in the UK at the moment. It's gone from one extreme to the other. So, you know, out of that adversity comes some light at the end of the tunnel. That suddenly they've seen that everybody's at home, but they're wanting to do something with their home, whether that's across Europe or in America or in the UK. So we've seen real ups and downs of some of our clients. I think that because we do quite a lot of work in the health and well-being space, we've been sort of semi-sheltered. We also do a lot of work with a company that's based over in Paris called The Union, which is it's a charity that's been fighting TB for the last 100 years. And it's the first alliance of 32 different countries or 23 different countries to come together to fight the issue of TB across the world. Obviously with lung health and COVID, they've had a huge issue of actually sharing their knowledge. So we've been helping them to share those knowledges through virtual conferences. So that health and well-being space has been quite active for us. We have a client in the States Dr. A, who's set up a company that looks after people with their health and well-being. We've been doing a lot of work with them. So we found that certain pockets are fine, whereas other obviously areas, if we're very fortunate that we don't do much on the high street really. I think if we were on the high street, I think we'd be feeling the pain a lot more. So we've been fairly fortunate in many ways, and we've seen a lot of clients now starting to come back and realize that they have to do something. And I think people are more acclimatized into this new environment and looking at the opportunities that there. I think people are coming out of those different stages of shock, and now there's that sense of you've got to look at, you know, pivoting and what can I do to take opportunities. And that's not just for our clients, but it's also for us, Peter. We've had to pivot. We've had to think about how can we help our clients. Like, we're having to change in our sector and our business, but how can we help our clients?
Well, that's a question I was going to allude to, is so how is your business going now, and kind of what's your plan for, say, the next 2 to 3 months?
It's actually, and I feel like I should touch some wood, and I'm touching some wood here, Peter, is that it's actually, things are going all right at the moment, really. We're actually looking to potentially recruit someone. We've seen the back end of last year, things start to pick up. And I think that part of that is, I think, what we've done to address how we can help people. I think also it's down to the fact that people are, or businesses are realizing that they can't just stay dormant. They have to do something. And I think what we've, you know, for many years, we've been working kind of quite strategically with many different clients, whether that's helping, you know, Mars develop a value proposition for a product, whether that's helping, you know, the Royal Institute of British Architects develop their membership communications activity, whoever that might be. I think that there's what we've realized is that people don't want to spend a lot of time trying to sort of address their purpose and discover their purpose, even though they know it's a time right now where purpose is really important. And I think brands that have a sort of social role and a public role are really important. But people haven't got the time, so they need to really very quickly discover that sort of who they are and how they can and what they offer, and present that in the most compelling way that's going to help their customers come to them. So exactly what we're doing, we have to do for someone else, for our clients. And what we've done is we've taken the work, the knowledge that we have, and we've compressed down something that might take a few months into something that can take a couple of weeks, because we have to work fairly rapidly. So it's about almost like strategic sprints. How do we actually get to what you need to understand really quickly with you? And I think we've probably turned around this year or last year, probably a dozen or so projects that were kind of fairly hefty strategic projects that normally would have ran on for quite a bit of time in a really short window of time, and spend less time on the thinking of the positioning. And when I say less time, that doesn't mean to say it wasn't well thought through, because I think we bring a lot of knowledge to it, of years of experience, but we can kind of compress that down because of our experience, but then spend a lot of our time activating it. And I think one of the big things that we've changed is we've created strategic alliances now with 2 partners who actually are based in our studio. So we have a media partner and we have a web partner, and we're bringing in a research partner this year. So in our room is we've created almost our studio, which is fairly vast. We've created almost like an ecosystem of like-minded businesses who work together and come together as a consortium. So we actually work as 3 different companies on one project, but bring the best value of what that client wants and needs. But we work so well together that we create a seamless experience, so it makes it easy for them. Yeah. So we've made it as easy as possible for them to activate things really, really quickly. And we've delivered some, you know, amazing results for our clients because of that in very, very short time windows. It's a bit like, you know, you know, Carlsberg don't do quick projects, but if they did, do you know what I mean? We've managed to turn things around really, really rapidly, and not jeopardize the quality, because we've just tried to do things in an agile way. So we've developed new models and ways of doing things that allows our clients to understand and give clarity and focus and direction to activity that they need very quickly. And that's what's that done. That's helped our success rate in terms of wins. It's helped our revenue. It's helped cut our overhead costs, because we've brought 2 people into our studio now with sub-rent space. So we've reduced our operating costs. So we've reduced our operating cost and started to maximize our sort of sales revenue. So it's sort of been, our models helped us both, you know, manage our costs as well as grow.
Yeah,
our
agile and adaptive.
Do you mean? And it's been great, because also, and it's also about that network of people around us that we work with, our professional advisors, whether that's our accountants, our lawyers. They're really important, but it's also friends and clients. I find I get mentored by our clients, and I know that I've been told sometimes that I feel like it's a counseling session sometimes when I'm with a client, because they need someone to talk to about their business.
Yeah.
And likewise, I need someone sometimes to talk to about where we're at, and it helps you gauge and benchmark where you're at, whether that's about information, whether that's about, you know, the sort of what's going on in the market. And also about, I think a big thing that we've done is try and you know, I've watched and listened to more podcasts on what's happening, because you just need to know and get insights from people. A good friend of mine who's head of strategic futures at Kantar Consulting, and they do a lot of, Lloyd does a lot of work at looking into the future of what's emerging. So I was really actively discussing things with Lloyd, and also looking at their podcast to find out that they're getting data from many different markets, to understand what are those changes, so that we can take that and learn from it and help pass that knowledge on to our clients as well. So in some ways, it's been a painful but really kind of quite liberating experience at the same way. It's almost been an enforced learning. But I actually feel I feel more invigorated by it now than I do concerned about it. I think it's a massive opportunity to help reset.
Yeah, and I think that's important, especially with the economy where we're going at the moment. The global economy has changed. We are very much a post-pandemic economy. Whilst we're still going through the pandemic, we needed to evolve and change and harness technology to adapt, and also, as you said earlier, to look at our individual staff members and, you know, change almost to become like a value culture. So
yeah,
the culture internally, people know that they are kind of respected and they're cared for, basically, because if we've got like a caring culture internally, the likelihood is you're going to get a better quality from a performance and higher levels of etc. So there are lots of positives to come from it. I think maybe the last question I'll chat about is, what would you say would be the 2 to 3 things that you feel that you need help with?
I think information and knowledge is always useful, because it helps you make sense of what's happening. As human beings, we need to make sense of the world around us. It's, you know, it's vital, and I think it allows us to make decisions when we have that knowledge. So I think it's always about knowledge and insight, but I think that's something that's becoming, it was tricky in the early stages because this was a totally and utterly unprecedented situation. I think another big thing is connections and networks. I think that in terms of, you know, before that point, in terms of finance, I think that we've found that the banks, and I would say that the UK government, I think, has addressed the business support packages really well for businesses. I think that, yes, things have been administratively maybe a bit slow at times, but that's because we appreciate what everyone's trying to pull out the bag. I think the key thing for us is about, like I say, growing that network, not just in the UK. I mean, I've got calls next week through I was going to say the DTI then, but it's basically UKTI. It's the Department of Trade Industry, with the Nordic states. I'm speaking to representatives in the embassies in Copenhagen and Oslo. So we're keen to look at creating connections in the Nordic states, which we do a lot of work in Europe. We do a lot of work in Germany and Austria and in France. And we do work in the US, but we're keen to broaden that. I think the one thing that was happening before this is people are not that bothered really about where you're based. And you mentioned it before, it's about people, and people buy people. And I think that, I've got a call this week with a Dutch company who we've been recommended to speak to. And I think what's interesting now is that really we've always worked with people around the world, extensively in the US. And I think we're keen to optimize that knowledge that we've gained from all those different, brands that we've worked with. We've worked with a lot with Mars, with PlayStation, with Bayer. We've done a lot of different projects with major brands, and we can take that knowledge and we can help companies around the world. And we don't necessarily need to be in our own city. It doesn't have to be in our own country. It can be wherever really. And with working this way remotely, it's really about experience and recommendation. And we get a lot of our work through recommendation. So we're keen to kind of grow that network. And like I said, it'd be fascinating speaking to the representatives in the embassies in Copenhagen and Oslo next week to see what that appetite is. And I think for me, the one thing is it is about those networks and connections, because it's a bit like, Peter, better than anybody, is that people get to know people, and there's authentic people, and there's people that maybe you are, Yeah. We have this saying a lot in the office, which is, don't tell me you're funny, make me laugh.
Yeah.
And, I think that there's a lot of people can tell you that they're funny. And there's not many people that can really make you laugh. And I think that, we focus a lot on the delivery and the quality of what we do. And I think that, that's something which it's a cliche, but it's so true. Just great work, really do great work. And you don't really have to worry about too much because people will say great things about you and pass the, word of mouth. And we did a piece of work once for PlayStation, and a guy left there and went to work for QuickBooks, and we did a piece of work with QuickBooks.
It's how it
do you mean we work with a client at Reba, they left and went to a client in Paris, and now we're working with a client in Paris. It's just, that's the way it goes. So I think it's networks that we really, I think, always value, and those connections that people can bring, because I think when it's a trusted support, when it's a trusted recommendation, there's a high likelihood that you'll get a conversion. So for me, it's about connections. Like I say, financially, we've had great support from government. I think that practically from our local authorities, they've helped us with business rates. They've helped us with, the government have been great in terms of phasing payments. That's been great. Our landlord's been brilliant at helping us. We used to have to pay our rent quarterly. Now we're paying it monthly. Little things like, which sound little, but they're actually quite important. Yeah, exactly. When you're paying substantial chunks of money to help the cash flow. So I think we've been pretty fortunate that we've got some great relationships with all those individuals. And that's really helped us. We've had a great relationship with our bank for years, and that's really helped us. So yeah, I think the one thing we're looking for, like I say, it's just those networks. It's the networks that we can expand into. And I'm using the relationships with the Chamber of Commerce that we have to use them and use their network of friends to help introduce us to their friends. So it's about finding more friends around the world, really.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I think that's with the pandemic, a lot of people had to adapt to the use of technology on a more regular basis, but equal to that is the opportunities that come with the availability of positive partnerships that you can get through various different networking sites, or interlinking with other organizations and their wider networks. LinkedIn is a great example of that. You see a lot of similarities to what people do, and you can harness positive relationships through just quick introductions and
totally.
Exploratory conversations. So,
I think there's also an appetite, Peter, for people. I think it feels like there's an emerging time for independence. The communications world's been driven a lot by major, WPP, by big agencies like, Interbrand, Future Brand, Saatchi and Saatchi. All the big boys will always be there, and there'll always be a role for them. But I think because people buy people, and from your own work experience of working in big businesses, is that big businesses can have some tiers of people in terms of quality in there.
Yeah,
And I think sometimes people go to the ones that are the good ones.
yeah, exactly.
And I think what's interesting now is that I think clients want to buy people, and they want to buy a great relationship and someone that's going to do the job. I mean, it was really interesting when we won this project for Egger last year, or the year before. We delivered it last year, which was to deliver a global campaign for a €2 billion business. Now, there was 18 people in Newcastle, and we were pitching against a company in London of a couple of hundred, and a company in Munich of a 300 or 400. And they chose us purely because they wanted someone who would work with them collaboratively, and they wanted to work with the people who were going to do the job.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
relationships are key for business nowadays, more so than ever.
Massively. I think there's an appetite now to not just suddenly say we'll get the best by going to the biggest.
I think there's that viewpoint, especially during the pandemic, has been, I would say, put to the side, because if you look at it in real terms, the biggest isn't always best. We talked a lot at the beginning of this conversation about agility, and often with large firms, though they have a lot of positive, I think the negative, which is well known in industry, that large firms aren't as agile and as adaptive to things such as pandemics. So we've witnessed that throughout the globe with regards to responses to the pandemic, and how companies have gone about their duties and grown and developed, and in some cases sadly not. But I think it's great to share your insight, and I think that's what I would probably say now is, for anybody watching this video, should you want to look more into Gardiner Richardson, there'll be a link below this video. I'd encourage people to like, share and subscribe. There's also going to be some detail below with regards to Darren's own background as well. What we're going to be doing in the coming weeks is we'll be aiming to share many more of these company insights with yourselves and others. So please stay tuned, and thank you very much, Darren, for your time. Very much appreciated. And look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.